Hey guys, so now if you have watched the previous 4 kind of breakthrough videos on runes to kind of teach beginners how to get used to using the runes without fretting about the names, I am going to encourage you to learn those names down the road, and I can help you with that. History is also very important because it really flows deeply through these runes. A little bit of it I'm telling you about, but it's really just scratching the surface. But what I'd like to do is take you a step further with some of these runes, and just to help you understand them a little bit better. So remember we had this one that had to do with the horse, and it's about movement. But I want you to think a bit about the relationship between man and beast, whether it's a man and his horse, a man and his dog. This is about trust and teamwork. When you are working with a horse, you've got to trust it, you've got to work carefully with it, you've got this partnership with it. Same thing with our dogs. This kind of a friendly loyalty to each other and integrated trust between two beings. So this has to do also with loyalty and trust, not only just movement. Also, another thing that it has to do with social status, and if you're wondering how to remember that today, the easy thing to remember is, well, this is about riding and movement. This is actually our vehicles. So these are cars, planes, boats, those types of things as well. The things we ride on to get from one place to another, even airplanes. So if you think of social status, you might want to think of the kind of cars people buy and perhaps how people are judged by the cars that they buy, and the kind of considered kind of a status symbol for people that they show off to the world. So that is another thing that this rune brings. Okay, so we also talked about this rune, which is about, we talked about balancing growth and kind of progress, but here's what this really comes from. This is actually named after day, night and day, and if you think of this as being day constricting into night, and then it expands again into either another day, or you can consider expanding into night. It's this cyclic of opposites, day and night, happy and sad. Things are always changing. It's all about cycles of things. It also can be death and then rebirth, the kind of the things how they die and then come back, like this, the daylight dies and then it comes back. I also see this as kind of when you have two opposites, but they reflect each other. Perhaps two people, this came up in a reading I did where we were wondering why somebody was against somebody else. And it's because she saw her as a reflection of herself, and kind of perhaps the shadow side of herself, maybe worried about her taking over what the other person was doing. But this is about the changing parts of something, how things are in flux and up and down. So that's another reading for you. But this is also a timing card. So this is actually one day. So remember our Rune of Harvest, and this is a completion of a project, but this is also, this rune is actually pronounced Yira. It's written with a J like Jira, but it's actually pronounced like the letter Y, Yira, and that means year. And if you think of the course of crops and cycles and harvest, you harvest once a year. So in terms of timing, this is most often used as considering 1 year. So things will happen in the cycle of 1 year. I have heard of people doing it 12 days, 12 weeks, 12 months, anything of 12, but most commonly this is something that indicates in about a year's time. Okay, so this is just to expand something we already know, kind of waiting because we need something or looking for something that we need or considering what our needs are. This is kind of a resistance that happens to it, but the resistance is to achieve a greater kind of refinement of what we are. So we are gathering things in order to create something better. We haven't stopped. We're attending to the needs. So this is a kind of a testing room because you always feel like you're kind of being pushed when this comes, that you have to either find something. It's like being on one of those treasure hunts when you have to find a list of things and then bring it to somebody to win. You got to find a straw and a bottle cap, but this is for a purpose that you're finding these. So this is kind of putting you to the test. So you may actually feel like when you're in this state of need that this is actually putting the querent to the test. They may feel like they're being tested. So I'm a fire sign. I'm an Aries. So this is one of my favorite runes. And actually what this represents, we talked about it meaning our work, our creativity. This is actually representative originally of a torch. This is not only creativity, this is actual art. So if someone's a musician or an artist or even artsy with words, poetic, if they are an author and that's their art, this is about your guiding purpose, your guiding force, that flame within you, that life force that drives you. So it's not only just work and toil, it's also about kind of the passion that burns within you. All right, we talked about this being one of movement. It's also about spiritual quests, so the internal journey, kind of the toward enlightenment or trying to figure things out. But it's also, and think of the letter R here, right order. It's everything's done in the right way to proceed. So it's kind of like a progression and progress of making things happen, the ride from here to there. Okay, so next Vehu, we talked about this rune, which is about worth and how much something is worth, its value. It can be money. And originally, remember, it was cattle. But when you're talking about a querent, often this can have to do with what is, say, the relationship worth? Or is the job worth the pay? Or what is the person's self-worth, their self-esteem like? So this is all about the value or the sensation of something having value or worth. If you were to get this and you were thinking of self-worth and you got this, that would be very strong. That would be a very wonderful feeling in terms of confidence. If you were to get it with something like this, it's almost like a nervous breakdown, that hail. Remember, it was the destructive force of hail. Or it's kind of like angry all the time. So you may want to investigate why that's happening. If you were to get it with something like that, that is the rune of victory. So this is very good self-esteem and someone that has very good social integration. If we were to have it with this one, it's almost like someone gets their self-worth from the gifts they have, the things that they share. They feel like they are able to contribute something, and that's what gives them their value. Remember our rune of communication, our antenna. So this is knowledge and things like that. But it's also accumulated knowledge as in education and learning. So this is about this can be higher education. This is kind of accumulated knowledge. It can be what you've learned. This can be school education, or something needs to be learned, or something needs to be communicated. We talked about our hammer or our thorn. We talked about it being could be violence or a weapon, but this is also about aggression. This is about even being quick-tempered, kind of that explosive, impulse-driven kind of temper or anger. It can also be passion. When you're driven by something, you're just passionate, but it also can be like a crime of passion. But it's also someone who may be defensive. You think holding that hammer up or that axe up to protect. So there may be a sense of being defensive. That may be why things are happening. Some people may just feel like they're defending their honor, which brings me to the next rune. So we talked about this being focus. So we talked about this rune as being one of things getting better, of a higher force, and of focus. This is actually a rune that is based on the god Tyr, who was the god of warriors. He sacrificed his hand to a wolf to save people, and so he's considered self-sacrifice. And so this rune has a lot to do with self-sacrifice, kind of like the hanged man in tarot. Warriors actually used to etch this symbol into their breastplate when they would go out to battle. Some actually carved it into their skin, into their chest, in order to consider it a sign of protection. Because it's a relationship with man in the divine, it also has to do with loyalty to the divine. And so having a kind of a higher line of ethics, kind of having an order of personal ethics and integrity, that's important. Acting with a code of honor. It's like focused on the straight and narrow, staying on the straight and narrow path. This can even be exhibited in ways that aren't angry, because the god of war isn't just in terms of violence. Sometimes we can protect the things that we love or care for. For example, my father is taking care of my mother who has dementia, and it's a huge self-sacrifice on his part. His battle is really trying to take care of her, and it's a battle of a higher order in ethics, really difficult. So this rune kind of represents the personal self-sacrifice. He's almost like lost one hand of his own so that he can take care of her and make her life better. So self-sacrifice. We talked about our ice rune, about constriction, and it's kind of concentrated into one area. It's a stasis, but as well, if you think of ice, if you consider black ice, it looks like water, but we can slide on it, we can really get hurt. So there are some people that use this to actually consider somebody who might be telling lies or wear a mask as kind of not being quite honest or not being all that it seems. So this can be someone that may seem charming, that actually has underlying motives or manipulating, somebody that perhaps is deceitful. So when you think of ice, it may not make sense, but they are actually serving to set you back, keep you in place rather than move you forward, but it basically has to do with trickery, and so you might want to consider black ice. Runes are read in reverse by many people. This is one that's negative either way. It's the same no matter which way you cast it. So there are some runes that keep the same meaning both ways. Kind of like Geifu, which is the gift rune. So this is the good one that's good no matter how you slice it. Remember our dowsing rod? This is our water, and this has to do with psychic potential, the feminine, the flow. This also has to do with, because it's so intuitive, it's based on emotion and being led by emotion. So if this comes up in a situation, you may want to consider that perhaps the person is being led by emotion in this more so than logic. So it has to do with the emotional response to something. It's also, think of the water that flows within us, the blood that flows within us. This is a life force that helps initiate healing and the flow of life through us. So that kind of liquid as well. Remember our lot casting dice cup, which had to do with fate and the opening of something. And this also has to do with taking a chance on something. But it also has to do with synchronicity, the chance meeting of something, that kind of fateful meaning of two people or two things or two situations that seemed not to be related, and you realize in the end they were destined to come together to create something bigger than the sum of the two. Okay, this is the legacy, the kind of inheritance. This is a different version of it. It's actually the same rune, just kind of separate a little bit. You may see it looking that way. But because this has to do with our assets, if you consider it on a personal level, these have to do with your personal assets. Pamela Anderson's would be her bosoms. For some people, it may be their beautiful singing voices. For some people, it's their art and the way they're able to display their creativity through their art. So it's what you pass on to the world, your legacy, or what you leave on for other people to benefit the world. My father used to always say, when you get your college education, nobody can take that away from you. So this is what you own, and then you take it and you give back to the world through your knowledge. So this is what is yours that you pass on to others. So not only is it a physical heirloom or inheritance or land that you pass on as the original meaning, this is also things that you have of yourself that you can pass on, more figurative. We talked about our constricted S as being that constricted U branch that can protect us as well as hurt us. But this particular type of wood, the U, was also considered actually the tree of the dead. So this would often be found in the Nordic cemeteries and the graveyards, leaning on graves. And it was considered kind of a bridge, a spiritual connection. So if you get somebody that's considering, say, psychic work, and you get this may be someone who has psychic tendencies to communicate with those who have passed on. Or someone says, hey, something happened, what did it mean? And you get this, someone who passed on may have been trying to send them a particular message, someone that they knew perhaps. So it's kind of a spiritual connection to the dead. One more meaning that I'd like to share with you. So if you were to consider this and this, remember, this is about staying in one place, frozen. This has to do with focus, really directed activity. And if I look at this, because you're staying in one place, it's almost like stop and smell the flowers, focus on something. This, to me, is like the power of now, living in the moment. Meanings, so those are a few extra meanings of the runes for you to put in your pocket. The next videos I put out will be showing some techniques that you can actually use for reading the runes. There are a lot of fun things you can do with them, and they can expand on the meanings for your readings. So I look forward to seeing you the next time.